Hello, music friends. Heidi Begay here from the Flute 360 podcast. As you may know, Flute 360 has been launching weekly episodes to the community since 2018. Because of the success that the podcast has brought my career, I wanted to offer the same success to you, the unclassical musician. As an unclassical musician, you want to impact your community through your music and instruction. You juggle multiple hats, being a performing artist, teacher, adjudicator, clinician, and more. Wouldn't it be nice to have a piece of digital real estate where your ideal clients can flock to you? That's exactly what a podcast can do for your music business. In a recent survey, 59% of participants mentioned that they spend more time listening to podcasts compared to spending time on social media. That's huge. Because of this, I am passionate to help fellow musicians launch their podcasts in my class titled The Podcasting Musician. Join me for the July 2021 class and learn from myself and my audio engineer husband all the ins and outs of podcasting. Register today through my website at HeidiKBegay.com. And for a limited time, I am offering Tori's listeners a 10% discount off of the remote class. Use your code TORI10 to receive your discount today. See you soon.
Hello, Heidi. Thank you so much for popping in on this Friday afternoon to be on the Unclassical Musician.
Oh my goodness, Tori. It is a pleasure, and I love seeing your beautiful face, and I'm just so glad to be here.
I love seeing your beautiful face, and I'm so happy to have you on the show because as I have described you previously, I do feel like you are my podcasting fairy godmother.
Oh, stop.
So I love that you are on the show now, and it's come full circle, and it's not a little baby podcast anymore. It's like doing things now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for the listeners out there who don't know, Tori and I actually met through Flute 360, and we became great friends and realized that she was wanting a space for herself. And so we got together and built together. Well, she built it, but I helped her build the Unclassical Musician, and she's thriving. What episode are you on right now?
Oh my gosh, I think this one is 28 or 29.
Woohoo!
Oh my gosh, that's crazy to think about. Like just having more than 25 episodes. It's like, what? Where is the time going?
Congratulations. That is a huge feat, and you should feel very well accomplished because, man, scheduling the guests, coming up with content, editing, marketing, it's a lot.
It is a lot, but I had a lot of help from you, and I really appreciate you. So,
Oh,
but for everyone who is not a flutist who listens to this show, can you tell people a little bit about yourself and Flute 360?
oh, sure. So, my name is Heidi, and I am a flutist, musician, educator, and podcaster. And so, a little bit about me. I originally was born and raised outside of Chicago, and then I pursued music. Music was a huge part in my upbringing. Both of my parents really loved the arts and really encouraged us three kids to be involved in musical activities. And so I came to the flute at 13 and loved it. I loved the creative process and expressing myself through the instrument. And so I knew that I wanted to pursue it further. And so I went to the University of Arizona, received my Bachelor of Arts degree in music, went east to Louisiana and received my master's in music degree. And then I had a 6-year break or span between master's and DMA. And during those 6 years, I taught 40 to 50 flutists in the Fort Worth area. And like you know it's a lot to juggle that. Invoices, parents, band directors, students, It's amazing though. I loved those 6 years and I grew so much as a person, as a teacher, and as a flutist. I wouldn't trade it in for the world. And during those 6 years, I had also taught in the evenings at Tarrant County Community College at the Trinity River campus, music appreciation, music theory. And I was also involved through the Texas Flute Society. And I wouldn't trade that for the world either. I got to be on different committees, the executive committee, the festival committee, and I learned a lot and I made some wonderful flute friends that I'm still in touch with today. Well, then in 2014, a little voice in my left ear said DMA, and I heard that calling, and so I decided for a year to get my playing chops back into order because teaching 50 students,
No time to practice.
no time to practice. And so I studied with Don Bailey for a year to get those performance chops back in order. And then I started the audition process. And then 2015 to 2018, I finished my DMA. And so I give you all of that because that DMA in the trajectory of my career was so important, because when I finished my DMA, as we all know, we have to graduate with some sort of doctoral thesis or a master's thesis, and my doctoral thesis was specifically the Flute 360 podcast. And I won't get into that or go down that rabbit hole just yet because I know you're going to have some questions regarding that, but that brings you up to full speed of where Flute 360 was born.
And can I ask, because I can't remember, what made you go from Louisiana to Texas?
Oh, very good question.
Yeah.
I don't think we actually talked about this, but it was a divine intervention, and my friend or kind of just acquaintance at the time was Clara Loy. And at the end of my master's in 2009, I attended a flute festival and Clara was there. Now, Clara is a very special woman because, you know, life is so ironic and funny. I had heard of her name in passing through those different degrees. So when I studied at EIU for a little bit my freshman year, Clara studied at EIU, but 2 years prior. And then later in life, when I went to Louisiana to get my master's, she had studied at NSULA also, but at a different time. So Clara was always like there. I always heard her name, but I never met her. Well, fast forward to this festival, Clara Loy was there. And I gave her a big hug. I'm like, you don't know me, but I know you. Because we studied with the same teachers. And we got to talking, became friends. And at the end of the festival, you know, these 2 short days, she looked at me and said, Heidi, what are your plans after graduation? And I said, I have no idea. She goes, okay, well, I'm 50% positive that I'm going to move to St. Louis. I said, okay, cool. And she said, if I do, would you like my studio? I have 40 to 50 flute students.
Oh.
And I said, shut up. That's amazing. And she goes, it's only 50%. I can't guarantee anything. I said, okay. Went home. I just got married. And I looked at Eric and I said, we're moving to Texas. And he goes, off of 50%? And I said, no, this is it. It really felt like my timing and God's plan. And I just said, this is what we're going to do. And he said, alrighty then. We moved July of 2009. And a couple weeks later, a month later, Clara called me and said, I am moving. You can have my studio. Move out to Texas. And I said, I'm already here.
Wow. Everyone who listens to this podcast has already heard enough about like 50% chance of like having students when you move to Texas. It's like definitely enough of a chance because even if it doesn't work out, you'll still have students when you move to Texas.
Exactly. And I didn't know that at the time. I had no idea that Texas was this huge hub of music educators and students, you know, really thriving in the arts. I had no idea. But the only thing, you're right, the only thing I said, well, if it doesn't pan out, Eric did want to get a recording certification through the Pro Tools program, which was in Carrollton, Texas.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, okay, no matter what, he would get certified.
And then you ended up doing your DMA at Texas Tech.
Yeah, exactly. Which was just a very great natural transition for me. I fell in love with Lisa Garner Santa, and she and her teaching methods and her approach to music was completely different than what I had prior. So I thought it would be a really good like switch and 180 for me to just like get into something different and really thrive under her mentorship.
Yeah, Lisa Garner Santa. I've only met her one time. She came to the University of Illinois while I was there, and she did like a yoga for flutists class on the stage of the concert hall, which was super cool to be doing yoga on the stage at the Cranert Center. That was really neat. And I got to play for her in a master class, and like the way that she like described some things. I remember playing Firebird for her. Was like unlike anything that I had ever heard before, and it was like finally something different and unique, because you only can hear the same things about having to like count in 6 and keep your toe going and use this alternate fingering. Like you can only be told that so many times, So she
Sure.
seems like a really cool lady, and she's a beautiful player too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think she's really good friends with your professor from U of I, Jonathan Keeble,
Hmm.
right? They're like BFF. So it's good to hear that you had that experience with her and that you got to play for her. That's amazing.
Yeah. And okay, so now, like, thinking about like the kind of flutist that Lisa Garner Santa is, how did it come about that you were going to do a podcast for your DMA project?
Right? Yeah. It wasn't even on my radar. Well, it kind of was on my radar. So, Lisa is so talented in the fact that she sees her students for the unique abilities and skill sets they have as an individual. And she really hones in on that. And I got to see her lead me down this path of saying, Heidi, you're good at this. Heidi, you're good at that. Let's throw it into a mixing bowl, mix it up, and what's going to come out? And what came out was a podcast. And so, with that mentorship happening, I also had at the same time, I'm married to my best friend, which I'm so thankful and blessed. But not only are we partners in life, but we were partners in a business before Flute 360 was born. So another side note over here that's really imperative to this mixing bowl analogy is he's an audio video engineer. And we own JK Media Productions, where we help musicians and podcasters with their recording projects. So here she's saying, you really need to start a podcast. And, over here, I'm thinking, yeah, that's possible. I have equipment. I have recording know-how from Eric. I have him, so kindly and lovingly offering his editing services to Flute 360. And I love to share information. I'm an educator by heart, and this is why I'm on this planet. And so you put that passion of sharing, right? Being a storyteller, sharing knowledge, the equipment side of things, Lisa's mentorship, and then out came the podcast.
Yeah, so that really is like the secret sauce is that like you had a live-in audio video engineer that was gonna help
Yeah,
you out with producing it.
yeah. And the thing is, like, he's a musician, he's a guitarist, he's a blues guitarist, and he got into recording his own music way back before Texas Tech. And when we moved out to Lubbock, he was looking for live sound work through different churches, and nobody was hiring. And so he said, okay, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm going to start my business. And as he was putting out his feelers saying, hey, musicians, come here. I'd love to help you with your recording competition needs, recordings for festivals, right? Musicians were knocking on his door, but actually the person who was knocking on his door the most were podcasters. And so we were making a living um, editing audio for podcasters. And this was in 2015. And so for those 3 years, as I'm taking, and you'll know it being a classically trained flutist who has 2 degrees herself, you have to take musicology, music theory, music business, the traditional classes. But on the sidelines, Eric is over here saying, oh, these podcasters are doing this. These podcasters are making money this way. I'm like, yeah. Let me just do my Shinkaran analysis, you know?
Uh-huh.
I'm like, this doesn't pertain to me. But he was feeding me that information at the same time. So he knew the industry. He wasn't just an audio engineer who could edit audio, he also knew the podcasting industry. And so it really definitely gave me a leg up for sure.
So like 2015, that was probably around the time that podcasts were starting to like become popular. Like cuz they had been around, like I remember podcasts were around like when I was in high school or like maybe even like in the 8th grade. Like they had been around for a while, but people like I would say maybe the average person who was not tech savvy or
Mm,
was not an Apple user did not know what podcasts were.
yeah.
So that Eric was like working with podcasters at the time when like the energy around podcasting was starting to build, that was like 6 years ago. Like that's really cool that he was like already like in at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right, like not to give anybody a podcasting history lesson, but you're right. Podcasting started around like 2004 with 2 gentlemen, Adam Curry and Dave Weiner. They're accredited for starting podcasting. Now, podcasting like really kind of stemmed from audio blogging, but since 2004 onward, it has grown steadily. Like you can look up the statistics on any website and you'll just see this very steady growth. And you're right, the awareness around podcasting and the listenership, those listenership numbers really were skyrocketing around that time, 2015, 2018. And just a little fun nugget, and this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this platform, is because it's not going away anytime soon. It's just not. Like by 2022 in the United States alone, 1 out of 3 Americans will be listening to podcasts every week. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
So,
yes. And especially when you get like once you get hooked on one podcast, then it's very easy to get hooked on another one and then another one. And then it's like there's so many of them and there's not enough hours in the day to keep up with all of them every week. That's what I find sometimes because I have a hard time reeling myself in. I have a lot of different interests. So sometimes I don't get around to listening to all of my podcasts every week. But
mhm.
um, I love that little podcasting history lesson. I did not know about that. That's great. Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, for sure. And I just say that because, like, if there are musicians listening to this and they're like, why are musicians podcasting? Just in general, like, podcasts are growing and it is such an a neat platform where it's accessible, it's budget friendly. You get to really like build this amazing intimate audience and these genuine relationships and connections into your orbit. And so I just kind of throw out that nugget of the fact that it is growing because it's something that's booming and it's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, and I also think that like many musicians are natural sharers, because we like everyone teaches in some capacity, and podcasting is like another way to like share, you know?
Hmm.
And so even though we're not necessarily playing our instruments, I also think that lately, like the last year and 2 months or whatever since the pandemic started, that a lot of musicians have kind of realized that like we have voices
Yep.
beyond just our instrument
Yep.
and
Yep.
they're valid and we don't have to just use our instrument to make a point, you know?
Yeah. Yes. And one of the questions that you threw in the email earlier was to this notion of why do you love podcasting so much? and piggybacking off of what you just said so beautifully about our voice, that's one of the reasons why I love podcasting, because you get to find and hone in on your creative, unique voice outside of the instrument. And think of what that does when you put the instrument to your face. I mean, literally, these 3 years of podcasting, I have grown exponentially as a flutist. Being able to, I'm not perfect, and today is probably not going to be a good example, but learning how to be comfortable in my own skin with my own thoughts and relaying that information in a very concise, direct manner with my Heidi dorkiness, my personality thrown into the mix. That's what we do as flutists or as musicians. We're storytellers. Like you said, we are natural sharers. And so if you can really ground yourself in learning how to articulate those ideas in your native tongue, and then when you put that instrument to your face, wow, I mean, seriously, magic happens.
I definitely agree. And also for me, like a lot of this, the past, how many months have I been doing this show? It's been like over 6 months now.
Yeah.
Wow,
I
that's
think,
crazy.
did you produce or did you hit the launch button around December?
It was actually like mid-October, I think.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
sooner than I thought.
Yeah. So it's been a little while. And I think that one of my favorite things about podcasting is that like so much of being a musician for so long has been like being in your practice room, you
Mhm.
know, or like being in your individual warm up room for such and such audition, or being in your bedroom recording for this thing, and it's very isolating. And the pandemic definitely like did not make that any better.
Mhm.
And so getting to talk to all of these wonderful people and getting to meet all these wonderful people through this podcast in the last year has really taught me that like as much as you might feel like you're alone in doing some things when it comes to being a musician, or like some kind of hardship or some mental blockages around being a musician, like you're definitely not alone, and that is
Mhm.
very comforting.
I love that. And I love hearing the growth that you just stated since October till now. And remember when we worked together, I was like, Tori, I'm so excited for you. Tori, I'm so excited for you. And it goes back to some of these, gold nuggets that we're saying, more people get thrown into your orbit. You get to hear their stories, you get to learn from them, and then you get to possibly see growth as a musician yourself. So I'm curious, like asking you now, have you seen growth as being a podcast host, which you do so well? Does that and do those skill sets like transfer over to your flute playing? Have you seen any connection?
Well, thank you for that lovely comment. Um, I think that the level of confidence in just like everything that I do as a musician, like everyone knows that I mostly teach a lot. Um, like I feel like I have a lot more confidence in that area and dealing with band directors and parents. um, yeah, I feel like I just kind of needed to be a little more comfortable using my voice. And
Mm.
this podcast has helped me to do that, which is a wonderful thing. And like you said, like you had said this like when I was in your course that like you'll be amazed like what it'll do for your flute playing and just like your overall confidence as a person. And then I was like, okay. But
That's nice, Heidi.
you were right. You were definitely 100% correct. For sure.
Oh,
I appreciate
cool.
that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And no, it's good to like actually for me to sit down with a friend like you and just to hear that growth and the reflection from or since October. We haven't really had a chance to follow up with, those insights. So it's good for me to hear that.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I mean, I like who knows what the future holds for this podcast. I hope that the future is bright, you know. But no matter what, like I regret nothing because it's been a huge period of growth for me, for sure. And what, you've been doing this since 2018?
Yes.
My gosh.
Right? We just put out, I think, episode 162 last Saturday.
Whew.
And yeah, woo! But it's funny because when I say that out loud, I'm super proud of the accomplishment and super proud of the collaboration that other experts have, shared with me and shared with the community and the work Eric and I have done. But I feel like we just started, because when I listen to my podcasting musician friends like Jason Heath, you know, through Contrabass Conversations, he's been doing it since 2007, and I think he's published over 720 some episodes. And it's like, what?
That's crazy to think about. Wow.
Yeah, so my 160 holds no light next to something like that. But yeah, it's been a fun journey.
So now can I ask you, like this last year, like during the pandemic, podcasting has really exploded. Like for obvious reasons, people being at home, it's something that you can do easily remotely, and it keeps you in social contact with other people. So why is podcasting like becoming such an important part of a musician's arsenal? It's like every other day I see another musician that has their own podcast on social media. Like, why is this going to be so important for classical musicians in the near future?
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it that you are observing that classical musicians are tapping into podcasting. That's exciting to see that growth because this is something that even pre-COVID, I feel like I was, on top of these rooftops preaching and screaming this idea of podcasting is an untapped market for musicians. I felt like more people, I wanted to invite more people onto this digital ship and say, come over here. There's, it really is an untapped market for musicians. And I'm glad that people are seeing the benefits to podcasting. And so that's really cool that you're noticing that growth. Um, Outside of being a musician, I'll put a pin on musician, but just podcasting in general, it's so important, I think, for any entrepreneur, just anybody who wants a marketing arm, some kind of like floodlight, shining a light onto what they do as a business and amplifying it out into the world. Podcasting is a great way to market your brand. Um, and then going into what we do as musicians, when you hear that and you say, well, I'm not a business. Yeah, probably you are a business and you just don't know it because us as musicians, especially freelancing musicians, we wear so many different hats. We're a teacher, an adjudicator, a clinician, a performer, a teacher, an author, right? Well, why not, for those who aren't on the bandwagon of podcasting and you are a classical musician, why not use a podcast to take that floodlight and shine it onto what you already do as a business and shine it out and make it known into your community of what you do and what you have to offer? And so I think I'm going down a rabbit hole here, Tori, but literally, podcasting I think is an amazing asset to any musician, and for various reasons. It's accessible, it's easy to create, it's budget friendly. In the beginning stages of Flute 360, I probably spent like $5-10 a month on my Lipson bill. The platform in general is booming, as we were talking about earlier. Um, you get to build that intimate connection around you and build these amazing relationships that previously may not have been there, and you're creating opportunities for yourself. And I could go on, but it really is a great way to create those opportunities, to build those doors for yourself if that's what you want to do. Um, yeah, I mean, podcasting is also an alternative to video. if you're not into video and you just want to hear something in the background as you're doing laundry, dishes, whatever. And I think it's a really cool way to catalog your journey, to kind of archive what you've been doing. And it's this great measuring stick to see your growth.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of musicians kind of shy away from the title of entrepreneur for some reason, myself included. Like I
Hmm.
remember like when you and I were on a call one time and you like called me an entrepreneur for the first time, I was like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, yeah, I am. But
Yeah.
like I had never like considered myself to be one, even though like I had taken, music entrepreneurship classes in college, music business classes, and had great role models for those. It's like like seeing them and the career that they have built, obviously like 15, 20 years my seniors, like that's an entrepreneur. They're
Mm.
very successful in what they do. And here I am with my flute lessons and gigging when I can. And, but it is like once you just like change that mindset and you're like, yes, I am an entrepreneur, then that changes
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a mindset for sure. And kind of stepping into that and saying, this is what I am, then you're going to approach it differently. Like the podcast, initially, it was just going to be my DMA thesis. I graduate, done. And then I continued it because I really loved it. I loved making connections and I loved learning. And then it became this glorified hobby. And then it was this CV builder. And then the next thing you know, it was actually that marketing arm for my business that I was establishing. And so I say that because, if you approach something as a hobby, it's going to be a hobby,
Mhm.
but if you approach it and you're like, oh, this is actually, it's evolved into now the backbone to my business. Wait a second. I'm going to have to approach it like a business, like, and think like an entrepreneur. And my action steps are going to be completely different than if it were just a hobby.
For sure. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Wow. No, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking because I really do think like the rate at which podcasts are going, it's like everyone has a website, everyone has a YouTube channel, everyone or many people are on Instagram or Facebook or both.
Yeah.
Next thing it's going to be having your own podcast.
Yeah. Very interesting. And, that is a very wise statement. And this is something that I said in the last class of the podcasting musician to some of my participants. And that was, I feel like the podcast, and for me, Flute 360 really gave me this piece of digital real estate, and I think that's kind of what you're describing here. And, it can really define you as a musician. I mean, I cannot take credit for these words of wisdom. I'm literally paraphrasing what Lisa Garner Santa told me. And, since your listeners are musicians, it's a tough world out there. It's very competitive.
Hmm.
There are a lot of pianists, there are a lot of string players, harpists, percussionists, etc. What is going to define you from the pack?
Hmm.
And she said, Heidi, if you take the population of flutists and you have male and female, you are now, it's cut into half, 50. Okay, you're a female flutist. All right. What's going to make you different from the thousands of female flutists out there? All right, well, you're married. Okay, that cuts it down. All right, you have a doctoral degree. All right, a little slimmer, but still, female flutists who are married who have their doctorate, that's still a huge population. And then she goes, okay, you own an audio video company.
Mm.
Mm. So now that significantly, reduced that group, right? And then, you're an educator, you're a, etc. But then you niche it down, you keep going down this funnel with all these multiple different steps. Now you're a podcaster. how many flute podcasts are out there right now? About 5. That's it. 5 living, breathing podcasts. And from there, flutists who podcast, how many have a terminal degree? 2. Katie Masad and myself.
Wow.
So, yeah. So instantly going from, bird's eye view, flutist, all the way down, niching down to flutist who podcast. Now I'm one of 2 instead of one of many.
Wow. I like that funnel approach.
Yeah.
That's
Isn't it genius?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm a very visual person, so seeing that and when she described it, that makes a lot of sense. And so full circle back to you, the listener, if you're listening to this, do the same exercise for your life and your career. Yes, there are millions of pianists out there, but for you, Jane Doe, you literally have a very unique thumbprint that you can offer the world, your unique offerings, your unique voice, and what are your different creative projects that separate you from the other pianists? What are you passionate about? What are you throwing yourself into? And I really encourage you to find that niche, because then I think those opportunities are going to be more abundant because people are going to be like, oh yeah, that podcasting pianist who owns an audio video company. There's one. Let me call her up.
And then you're automatically the expert in your field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
and
shoot.
I found you, or rather you found me, because I had posted something on my Instagram, like my top 5 favorite podcasts or something like that. And Flute 360 is one of them. And I had tagged you. And then you reached out to me and were like, oh, thank you so much for talking about the podcast on your page. I super duper appreciate it. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, you like podcasts, right? Like, did you ever consider that you might be able to like have your own podcast? And I was like, you know what? I always thought maybe I could have my own podcast, or like I always thought that I wanted to have my own podcast. But did I ever think I could actually have my own podcast? No. And then you took me under your wing. I became your guinea pig and went through your podcasting musician course. And now the Unclassical Musician is like out there in the world. And it's all thanks to you and your podcasting musician course.
Oh my goodness, you're too sweet. And first and foremost, Tori, you take and you deserve all the credit. And yes, I sought you out, but you sought me out because you are a go-getter. You are such a hard worker. You are such a beautiful, intelligent flutist woman that I am so proud of. And yeah, I taught you how to podcast, but you kept it going. Like you're the one who has to show up in front of the microphone every day and, be there and be a resource for your tribe. And so all of the credit goes to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Heidi. You're so sweet, but really like could not have done it without you. So let's talk a little bit about your podcasting musician course. Can you tell the people a little bit about what that is all about? And I can share some of my experience as well.
Sure. Yeah, well, y'all, you need to know this. It literally was built on Tori's back. I saw an opportunity and I said, I cannot let this beautiful person leave my orbit because she has something. I want to mentor her in some way. I saw that you wanted to scale up in some capacity. And we basically came to the conclusion that, yeah, podcasting actually could be your thing too. And you wanted to dive into the realm of podcasting. And so I say that because I literally said, all right, Tori, let me take my DMA thesis and purge it into a class. And so when she says she was the guinea pig, she was the guinea pig. And it worked out beautifully. And so that's the backbone of the podcasting musician. So I feel I need to say that because yes, I'm a guest on her show, but I'm not just a guest on anyone's show. I'm a guest on somebody's show who I've worked with for the last, or I've known and grown to love, throughout these past 6, 7, 8 months. And we formed a very special bond through that class. And so it's extra special for me to share that. Yeah. If you were anyone else, I would just be like, yeah, the podcasting musician class is a 5-week class, but literally Tori is like it. I mean, she was the reason why the class started. Because I saw then a need, and not just in you, Tori, but then I started noticing like, oh, wait a second, these other conversations that I was having with other musicians, they were seeking something similar to what you were seeking, but I just hadn't put my finger on it. And so then I thought, wait, this could really help a lot of people, not just Tori. I can maybe possibly help more. And so, yeah, I built the class and it extended off my DMA thesis. I really wanted it to be super interactive. I wanted to be there. I wanted to help musicians just know that podcasting is super accessible and you can do it too. Like if I can do it, if Tori can do it, you can do it too. And not to sound cheesy, like I can, so can you.
No, it really is not that difficult. Like you can do it.
Yeah, like really. Yeah. And so Eric, because he is my business partner and he's, half of why Flute 360 has been around for so long, I decided to co-teach the class with him. And so, and fast forward a couple classes later, I've actually onboarded a graphic designer, Catherine Baker, who's also a flutist. Yeah, and so she helps with the branding element too. And so this class has really evolved since you've taken it, Tori. But it basically, we help the musician who is interested in building his or her own podcast from scratch to launch in 5 weeks. So in week 1, we keep the end goal in mind. Why are we doing this? We develop your podcast theme, which includes your podcast title, the avatar. We have some activities around that to really ground yourself before we start getting into the other elements. So then week 2, we go through podcasting equipment and the art of recording. And this is co-taught with Eric because he's the audio guru. And then week 3 is learning how to edit your audio through Pro Tools first. And you get hands-on experience from an audio engineer who's been doing this for 10 plus years. I won't say how old he is, but he's such an old soul and such an old man, and I love him. He's gonna love that. But you get to learn and do hands-on. Like you download a free digital audio workstation onto your computer, or AKA a DAW system. You download it and then you work with Eric hands-on, and he gives you all the tools of trimming and fade in and fade out and bringing in the intro, outro music, etc. Now I will say, little side note, since y'all are musicians, how much would that skill set help your music studio? Like as you're recording your studio's recordings for competitions, festivals, we need to know how to use technology. We're in the 21st century. If we don't know how to use audio interfaces, GarageBand, microphones, headphones, equipment, I think we're really doing ourselves a disservice. But anyways, off my soapbox. And then week 4, we go into launching your podcast. I teach you how to market your podcast and create content for your show. And then week 5 is bonus, where I teach you the different streams of income that can come in and out of the podcast and basically how to monetize through your show.
And I will say that that time with Eric, with working with Pro Tools, that is like invaluable. Like I've definitely, like it used to be like when I was having to record something for something or other, and I would have so much anxiety about having to get it onto my computer and trim it and do all of the editing stuff for, like, oh my God, what if I accidentally delete it? Like, and I like now it's just like absolutely no problem. Like I edit this podcast every week. Like this is no problem.
That is so cool. Yeah, and just that confidence factor again, Tori, like you were saying, before working with Eric, you're like, oh my gosh, what if I break something? What am I doing? But now that you have the skill set, you're just like, bam.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
And the way that the class is laid out, it's like you meet on Saturday, and it's not like your whole Saturday. It's just like a couple hours. Like how long is the class on Saturdays now? Is it like 2 hours?
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely minimum an hour and a half. And
Hmm.
it has to be just because it's a lot of content. But we tried to get through the information in about an hour, and then you have about 30 minutes of Q&A because I want you to pick my brain if need be.
Yeah, so it's not like it's your entire Saturday. And you
Yeah.
have the entire week to do all of the homework. And honestly, the homework is it's homework that is going to help not just your podcast, but your whole like the persona that you want to embody in your career as a
Mm.
musician, right? So it's not like you're not just creating your ideal audience person for your podcast. It's like these people are then going to be exposed to everything else that you do as well. So having like going through the whole process of setting up the podcast and getting the branding right and the messaging and all of that, it really like branches out and affects like everything else that you do as a entrepreneur or freelance musician. So it's such a good tool to just get yourself focused on what you're trying to do with your career.
Oh my goodness, Tori, I love that feedback.
Hmm.
And yes, I'm so glad that resonates with you and you see, that clear connection. You're right. Like just week one, yeah, we're keeping the end goal in mind for your podcast and the podcast theme, but you're so right. We're laying the foundation for who you are in this music community and what you're doing and how you're serving the community and who that person is on the other side and figuring out your why statement, figuring out the mission statement. Like, yeah, it's totally integrated in what we do already as musicians. And so it's good to remind ourselves of that, and lay out that groundwork because it really goes into everything that we do. You're right.
And this class, you're offering this class now for the month of July, correct?
Yes, I thought it would be a good time to, if this is something that the community was interested in, it would be a great time to do it before the academic year starts
Hmm.
because the minute August 15th or whatever, date hits, we're just full throttle into our students and our studio. And so I thought, a fun summer project could be you building your podcast and integrating it into your business. So, yes, it's offered the 5 Saturdays in July of 2021.
I love that timing because, yeah, no one wants more homework on top of the homework that they already have if they're currently in school or when they're teaching full time, you know.
Yeah, nobody needs that.
Yeah. Well, I honestly cannot recommend your class enough. And I mean, obviously, it works because like we're here doing this right now. Like this is all the evidence that anyone needs that the class is worth every cent.
Yeah. Oh, you're so sweet. And I'm just curious, since I am hearing your, reflections and whatnot right now. Um, I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like a lot of great opportunities have unfolded for you and the Unclassical Musician. Do you mind sharing a little bit of like what the Unclassical Musician has done for your career in these short 6, 7 months?
Yes, of course. So, like I've talked about before on the show, how musicians are very, they feel like gross about networking sometimes, even though we all know that we need to network. Um, the podcast has ended up being such a great networking tool for me beyond social media. And it's not networking, it's building relationships and getting to meet really cool people,
Yeah.
which is awesome. Like people that I never would have met virtually otherwise. Like maybe we would have run into each other at an NFA convention or something, but like to get to meet like now virtually in the middle of a pandemic is super cool, and to be able to help each other out, because like when I have people on my show, it's like we're sharing audiences,
Mm.
right? Through building relationships. And also it's like, I mean, I know you've got that the Instagram Marketing and Sales Academy with Nicole Ricardo.
Mhm.
And like I'm participating in the virtual flute music festival, the Piccolo program with Katie Velasquez, and I'm in Catherine Eminette's music teacher's playbook course right now. Like so much professional development has happened, and I feel much more like a professional now, I would say.
Awesome. And were they all guests on your show?
Yeah, they were all people. Well, most of them I had like we've like chatted casually on social media, but I had never actually met before. So like we were like friends on social
Yeah.
media, but now we're like actually friends, which
Yeah.
is awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Tori. And that goes back to the nugget that we said earlier. Really, truly, you're building intimate, genuine relationships. I mean, it's so much different than social media. I mean, don't get me wrong, we met through social media,
Mhm.
but it's it's very almost passive, like, "Hey, I like your show. Cool." But until you pick up the phone and actually get to know the person, it just takes it to a whole different level. And so you're right, the people that have been coming in through your show, right? Yeah, you saw them through this and that, but now you're actually true friends. And I
Yeah,
feel the same way about my Flute 360 guests too.
which is so cool because you've had so many great flute players on Flute 360.
Yeah, it is a little like pinch me, like what is this? Yeah, I'm extremely blessed that those 100+ flutists have taken out the time and carved out the time to share their talents, expertise, with the community, and I'm forever grateful.
So cool. Wow, just like over here living the dream, Heidi. Like the very first, I mean, were you like the first flute podcast?
No, I cannot take that credit at all. I believe Rebecca Fuller has been going on longer than Flute 360. I love her show. It's something like Learn Flute. I forget the title specifically, but Rebecca Fuller is amazing at what she does. And there were other flute podcasts before 360. Actually, Flute View had a podcast, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, but they took that down, I believe, and they're focusing on the magazine, which is
Hmm.
phenomenal. And there was like the Two Guys
Flute
podcast.
cast.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
With Stephen Clark and Eric. Oh gosh, I can't remember. It's something Scandinavian. They're so
Yeah.
funny, but then they only
Yeah.
did like a handful of episodes or something.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
think they aired before Flute 360. So I don't really know like who came in or came out at what time, but I do know that I was not the first. Thank goodness, because I've learned a lot along the way.
And now you're just sharing that information with everyone else who can now have their own podcast.
I'm trying. I'm trying my very best, and yeah, I hope more people jump on board because what's the JFK saying? When the tide rises, all boats rise. Something along those
Yes,
lines.
something
Yeah.
like that.
So
Yes.
there's plenty of space. Amy Porter just started hers.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I was like, oh, thank God. People know Amy Porter. They may not know a Heidi Begay ever in their life, but if Amy Porter has a flute podcast, just the awareness of podcasting for musicians is just going to level up.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm super happy that we are able to offer the Unclassical Musician listeners 10% off of the podcasting musician course. Very exciting.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for collaborating with me and getting the word out. But I am stoked to use or to offer that 10% code to your listeners, and I believe the code is Tori10.
Woohoo.
Did you ever think your name was going to be in a coupon code?
Oh my God, no, never. It's still very surreal to me. Like, no big deal. This is fine.
Yeah. Tori 10.
And just so y'all know, I mean, like, I hope if you've been listening to my podcast for a while, you know that my first name is spelled Tori. So it's Tori10. Tori10 is the coupon code. And we will put the link to register for the class in the show notes, as well as links to Flute 360. So if y'all haven't listened to that yet, y'all can go ahead and listen to that. And all of your other wonderful things that you have going for you, your beautiful new website, etc. Is there anything else that you want to plug today before we go?
Oh my goodness, there was so much already, but thank you for asking. Yes, I would love to be in communion with you. Like, I know this podcast you're listening to right now as you're putting on your makeup or you're driving, and then you're like, oh, that was a cool conversation with Tori and Heidi, and you're on with your life, and so you should be. But just know that Tori and I love building relationships, and we love to get to know you, and we want to get to know you. So feel free to reach out to me through social media. My handle is the same everywhere, at Heidi Kay Begay. So it's my full name, and K is spelled out, Kay. So Heidi Kay Begay through Facebook, Instagram, all of that. But yeah, feel free to hit me up on my website, HeidiKaybegay.com, and shoot me an email at HeidiKaybegay@gmail.com. So I try to keep it really easy for people to find me. And I love getting love letters from audiences. I think it's amazing when a listener sends me a message and they say, oh my gosh, that topic really resonated with me. Oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of that before. And it's like, and the stars align, and it just all is well with the world.
I agree. I love getting to hear from the listeners. If you've been listening to this show for a while and you haven't like said hey to me yet, I don't bite.
No, she doesn't. She's an angel.
Thanks so much, Heidi. Well, I super appreciate your time today. Always lovely to get to see you and chat. And best of luck with everything that you have going on right now. And hopefully people will get to work with you in July.
That would be amazing. I would love that.
Yeah. Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much again for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your Friday.
Thank you, Tori.
Bye.